What is going on, guys? Lawson here. So, lately I've been seeing a few different people post fishing stories where they're talking about awesome fish catches, whether it's PBs or just memorable catches that happened in the past. Lake Fork guy, Justin Rackley, super, one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. He's posted a few stories, talking about how he got into fishing and where it really evolved into more than just casual to being a full-on passion. And Matt Allen and Tim Little from Tactical Bass, and very cool guys too, they talk about their PBs. They've told stories about these monster largemouth they've caught pre-YouTube era, pre-filming era. So I want to tell a story about kind of how I got into fishing and my PB snook, which is a question I've been asked a lot. What is my biggest snook? And this story, I'm going to go back because I think to have a good story it needs context. And so I'm going to kind of tell you, my fishing roots and what brought me from being kind of a casual fisherman fishing once or twice a month to someone who tries to get out almost every single day and catch fish. And the story's going to revolve around that guy right there. We'll hop into it. So, growing up, my dad pretty much taught me everything I know about fishing for the most part when I was younger. And, I've learned a lot more now just from putting in so much time and experience, but he's the one who got me into fishing. He has fished since he was a little kid, and he knows his stuff. But growing up, we mainly only ever did live bait. That's all we did. We would bass fish a lot, and we would throw worms like, Texas rigs for bass, and we'd also throw shiners sometimes, but we would throw a lot of shrimp and a lot of mullet if we were saltwater fishing, and that's really all I ever grew up doing, was live baiting and dead baiting. And which is a weird contrast to now. You guys know me, I literally only throw lures and throw artificials for the most part. So growing up, we had a 14-foot aluminum John boat, and that thing we bought for $800 from our neighbor when I was 6 or 7 years old, and we put a 25 horsepower Yamaha on the back of it, and we used that thing from when I was 6 till I was 17, and we actually just sold it 2 weeks ago. My dad he kept the motor and sold the boat for $300. It was a 1968 14-foot Alumacraft, and that boat saw a lot of work. It saw alligators when we used to alligator hunt. It saw duck hunting, big snook, big jack, dolphin, bonita, everything. It was just, we would take it bass fishing, and then if it was flat out, we would take that little 14-foot boat out 2 miles out and fish for dolphin and bonita and that stupid little thing. We did everything in it, and it was an awesome boat. It definitely beat the crap after the end of it, but it was a very cool boat. And so growing up, that's what I fished out of, was this little boat. And high school, I didn't fish a ton in high school. I fished occasionally, like maybe on the weekends I would go out to parks and bass fish maybe once a week, or even if that much, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. In high school, I was all about sports. That was my life in high school. I played soccer and I ran cross country. I was captain of my soccer team, and cross country team we went states. And I was not that I was an amazing cross country runner, but we had a good team, and I was kind of a middle of the pack runner. But soccer, that was my thing in high school. That's what my whole entire life was about, was soccer. So sports were what my main focus was in high school, and I feel like that's a lot of people where, they focus on the sport, and then when they have the free time on the weekend or summer break, that's when they fish. And that's what I did for the most part. And I thought about pursuing soccer further. It wasn't like I was some amazing soccer player bound for the pros. Like, I could have played, like, I don't know, D2 maybe. But it was just fun. Like, I really enjoyed soccer. And I've told this story to Alyssa 1,000 times, she's sitting behind the camera right now. But I remember going to a training camp at a college for soccer and getting there, and up to that point, from being 11 years old to 18, soccer was like all I wanted to do. And getting to a training camp at a college, and there's like 5 other guys there, and we're all running around playing, and we started at 7 a.m. and we played from 7 a.m. till 12, and then we took a 20-minute lunch break, and we played from 12 till 5 in the afternoon. and us gathering around with all the players and the coach saying to us, I hope you guys enjoyed today. That's what's going to be like every day for training and when you're here, like, going to play with us. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to play soccer this much anymore. Like, the commitment is different where Alyssa, she's a college athlete. She runs cross country in a D2 school, and she's up every morning at 5 a.m. running 7 miles and then works out in the afternoon. And it's a lot of commitment, and I just personally, it wasn't what I was looking for, really. So I kind of started slowly fall off of soccer, and not that I still didn't play all the time, but I kind of stopped, putting so much into it where I was like, all right, I want to play at this level, and I'm going to move on to the next level. I was kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm okay with playing in high school and being done with it after that. So now we're getting closer to this guy right here. My junior year, the end of my junior year, going into my senior year of high school was really where I don't know what happened, where like a switch kind of just flipped, where almost every single day of that summer I went fishing. And my dad and I, we went out in the old little duck boat, and we'd put it in, and we would go snook fishing almost every single day. If you're not aware, during the summer, that's when snook spawn. So there's a lot of big fish around, and they're feeding like maniacs, and they're very aggressive. It's the best time to catch a lot of snook and big snook. So, summertime, almost every single day, my dad and I'd go out. He would drive the little tiller, 25 horsepower, and I would stand on the front with a cast net, and we'd throw until we caught half a dozen mullet. And we had open face reels that you've seen me use before, that old Penn 535 graphite frame. That's a reel from like the 90s that my dad's had, and I still use it now. The thing is a tank, and that's what we'd use for live baiting for snook. And that's all we would do. We'd go out to seawalls or points and mangrove lines, and we would just float a mullet down and just sit there anchored and wait for a snook to come and hammer it. And that summer, I think we probably caught maybe 30 to 35 snook, all from 28 to 38 inches, all respectable sized fish. We didn't catch any absolute monsters, but we caught a lot of great fish. So back then, I didn't really throw lures really ever, which is kind of weird thinking about now. You guys see me, and I don't throw live bait ever anymore, and I only throw artificials. But that's kind of where this fish came in and why it's such an important fish in my fishing career, because it kind of flipped the switch and changed everything that's going on in my life, really. Fishing wise, I should say. So, step back to June. It's my birthday. My dad gets me a Abu Garcia Aura inshore bait casting reel on a 6'6" GSX2 gander rod. And this is the exact rod that I use. I don't have the reel anymore, unfortunately, but this is the rod that it was on. It's only a 6'6" medium light rod. It's not a heavy action rod at all. And so he got that for my birthday, and I used it for bass fishing, and I used it for throwing lures for snook. But I really didn't know anything about throwing artificials in salt water, or for inshore fish, really, at that time. And the only time I'd ever pick it up was if we didn't have any live bait. And typically I would throw like a topwater, or I'd throw a Rapala or something like that. So I have this little reel, this little setup that's really meant for like bass fishing and catching smaller snook and redfish. Step forward a month. It's about mid-July, and my dad and I are out fishing, and we have like 6 live mullet, and we slowly, we're out fishing. We fish from like 4 till 8, and we have some live mullet, and we're putting them out, and a few of them die, and we have 2 live mullet left. And my dad puts one out, and he's letting it out, and it gets about 50 yards from the boat. It's swimming across the top, and we would hook them right beneath the anal fin, or right above the anal fin, and so they swim right at the surface, and it looks like a little topwater lure swimming around out there. And just all of a sudden, you'd see your mullet swimming, you'd see a wake start beelining towards it, and just sound like someone picked up a shotgun and went boom and shot it in the water when those big snook hit, because they slammed their jaws shut so tightly on those baits. And he just gets hammered, and he's sitting there, and he's letting it run, take line, because he circle hooks. He flips the bail on his, flips the lever on his open face reel, and just starts reeling, and he's on. And it is a 38-inch snook. The thing's jumping around. I shouldn't say jumping around. When snook get big, they're like bass. They can't really get out of the water when they get to a bigger size. And that thing's thrashing at the surface. and we get next to the boat, and I reach down and put my hands in its mouth, and we pull that fish in, and we are losing our minds. We're like, this is the biggest fish we've caught all summer. It was 38 inches, and it was awesome. We were just freaking out. We were so pumped. We caught a lot of big fish that summer, but that was the biggest one so far. And I had one mullet left, and it was pretty much dead, and so we were just ready to call it a night and be done with it. And so I take that mullet off and kind of throw it off, and my dad picks up the cell phone, and he's talking to my uncle on the phone, and telling him about, how he just caught this big snook or whatever. And so I pick up bait caster, because we didn't have any mullet left, and so I'm just throwing my little bait caster. I'm throwing, what do you know, a black and chartreuse super spook right there. So, I pick up the classic black and chartreuse super spook, and I don't even, there was a sandbar I was kind of throwing at, but to be honest, I really wasn't throwing at structure. It wasn't like I was throwing towards a seawall and pulling it off a seawall, and throwing it towards a mangrove point. We were in a channel, and there was a sandbar right there, and I was throwing it up on the sandbar and pulling it off the sandbar. So there's kind of some thought going behind what I was doing, but really not a lot. And so I'm pulling it off, and I'm just working that spook, walking it, and about 20 yards away from the boat, maybe 15, I'm walking it, and it looks like a boat wake is following it. It looks like someone's in a 20-foot flats boat just idling behind it. There's just a big giant V coming towards it, and I just keep walking it, and it looked like someone dropped a cinder block on top of my lure, where it's just walking, all of a sudden, boom, a humongous explosion, and I reel down and I just slam into it, and I think, all right, it's got to be a big jack or whatever, and it's a freaking snook, a monster-sized snook, and I set the hook, and it takes like a 5-yard run at first, and then shakes its head at the surface, and then dives down and just starts screaming out line. Now remember, I'm using a bait caster with 70 yards of line on it, and it's just ripping out line, and I look at my dad, I'm like, dude, you gotta chase this thing. And so he starts up the little tiller engine, and he's chasing it down in the little duck boat, and we're after, and I'm gaining line as fast as I can, and reeling, and we catch back up to it, and he goes into idle, but he's leaving the engine on, and the thing comes up and thrashes at the surface again, and then it's right back and makes another long run, and my dad's having to go after it, just kind of, he's not like we're running after like it's a billfish, but he has the boat in gear, and we're chasing this fish down so it doesn't spool me. And it made 3 runs that we had to chase it down the boat that were over like 50, 60-yard runs, which is weird because snook, big ones, typically they don't make humongously long runs. They'll make really hard, short runs a lot of times, but they don't always do like a big, long run, but this thing was on the move. And so it runs, and at this point, we know it's a snook, but we don't really have any idea like how actually big it is. We just know it's a big fish. And I get it up to the boat, and I remember I'm standing on the front of our little 14-foot aluminum john boat and seeing the snook slowly roll to the surface, come in sideways pretty much because it was tired. And so it's coming in and just kind of rolls in sideways like that. And seeing this black and chartreuse spook hanging from its mouth right there. And it had the back treble hook in its mouth like that, and then the front treble hook was hooked into his gill. Not his gill, but like on top of his gill plate like that. And seeing this huge fish roll into the boat, and I was freaking out. And I remember leaning down and putting my hand in its mouth. And at that point, I've never even seen a snook that big. And reaching down and struggling to pick this fish up out of the water. And I was just freaking out. And we picked it up and we unhooked it. We took out measuring tape and we measured it 43 inches and 25 inches around. It was about a 32-pound snook. And that was just a big fish, And snook fishing, the kind of trophy-sized fish, like that is a big monster snook, is 40 inches and over, is like, that's a monster. And so I would say, in my mind, like 32 to 39, that is a big fish. And then 32 to 28, like that's a medium-sized fish, and 28 below, like that's a smaller-sized snook. But that fish was 43 inches, and it was on an artificial. And all of a sudden, like I was saying, kind of flipped the switch in my brain. I was like, why am I wasting so much time throwing this cast net catching live mullet, if I can catch fish like this, throwing artificials. And from there on out, it kind of turned into like throwing lures as much as I could, more and more, you know. I still would throw live bait, but it would just became like 50-50, where I'd throw live bait half the time, I'd throw lures half the time. Then it became 25-75. It's like 25% of the time I'd throw live bait, and then 75% of the time I'd throw lures, to where we are now, where it's like can't even remember the last time I threw a cast net. And I think it was, I did a video maybe during the mullet run. That's the last time I threw the cast net, I think it was, actually. And now it's like I'm putting forth so much effort into catching these fish on lures, because it's just such a much more rewarding thing, is catching that big giant fish on an artificial, that you are primed, like you are in control of that lure. Everything from that lure to you is your skill and your talent. You're trying to trick that fish in, where when you're throwing a live bait, you know, it's up to that bait really to catch that fish for you. And I think it's not to take anything away from live bait, I just don't enjoy it anymore. I think if you're not able to get out very often, and you know, you only get out maybe once a week or a few times a month, throwing live bait, that's great, because that's what's going to give you the best chance to catch fish. But I'm in a fortunate situation now where I'm able to fish more and more, and so artificials, it's a much more rewarding game. If you guys have any other questions or any other stories you want to hear, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's different, but I figured I'd do this video to explain a story behind my big snook, and also the weather the past few days has been terrible. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.